guys, welcome back to the Curly Reader. My name's Amanda, and today we're going to talk about my 2021 reading stats. Okay, so this past year, 2021, I used a reading spreadsheet for the first time. I used the Book Riot spreadsheet, which I will link down below. It was my first time using a reading spreadsheet and I loved it. I'm using a different one this year. I will also link below my 2022 reading spreadsheet video. But because I did a reading spreadsheet, the nice thing about using a spreadsheet is it will automatically calculate all of your stats for the year, and it is super convenient. So I put in all of the books as I read them throughout the whole year, and now at the end of the year I can share with you some of my reading stats for the year. I find it really interesting to kind of look back and review how much time I spent reading, how many books I read, what percentages of the books were in certain categories, things like that. I just think it's fun. And so yeah, we're just going to share a little bit of that today. All right, so I have my computer here and I'm just gonna kind of share with you guys some of this. So the total number of books I read in 2021 was 165. With 165 books, that represented 52,656 pages. Of the audiobooks I read, I put in the time that I listened for the audiobooks, and I spent 951 hours, 40 minutes, and 43 seconds listening to audiobooks. So in case you're wondering, that's 39 days, 15 hours, 40 minutes, and 43 seconds. That's a lot of time. Keep in mind that I mostly listen to audiobooks while I'm multitasking. So there's that. On average, it took me about 10 days to finish a book, on average. On average, read about 90 pages a day. I listened on average to about 2.5 hours of a book each day. And my average books per month was 13 3/4. So between 13 and 14 books a month was my average. All right, so now let's get into some fun charts here. Format, digital versus print. No, print versus audio. I listened 61% of my reading was done via audiobook. So that means 37 was print, 2% was digital. At a certain point in the year, I stopped tracking digital and I just considered it print. It's most of my digital books, I go back and forth between the physical and the digital, and it was just too hard for me to track. So I quit tracking it, but the 61% audio is accurate. So that's a lot. All right, and then fiction versus nonfiction. Of the 165, I had 15 nonfiction books and 150 fiction. So there's that. All right, now let's talk about audience, because I always talk about how much middle grade I read, and I'm not wrong, guys. 49% was middle grade. I always say about half of my reading is middle grade, and I was right on. So 49% was middle grade, a little over 35% was adult, and a little over 15% was YA. All right, and then we get into kind of the style of writing. And so the three that I kept track of was prose, poetry, which was book and verse. That's what I consider book and verse. And comics, which is any graphic novels. So 83.5% was prose. Poetry was a little over 3%, and comics was just under 13%. And so that seems about right for what I normally do. I reread 6 books. That's just like randomly on here. And then my publication year, I found very, very interesting. I pretty much had an even split between books published in 2021, books published in 2020, and everything else. So everything else was 46.5%. Books published in 2020 were 53%, and books published in 2021 were 37%. I understand that's not exactly equal, but that was much closer than I thought it would have been. I would have thought the backlist would have been a lot higher, and it wasn't. So I found that really, really interesting. All right, as far as the source that my books came from, whether they were my own TBR, I tracked if I purchased them in 2021, if they came from the library, if it was a review copy like NetGalley, if I got it from Scribd, or if I borrowed it from somewhere else. And about 23% were from my owned TBR, 23% were books that I purchased in 2021, and about 50%, over 50, or that's not right. And then about 30% were library books, and 17.5 were review copies. And then I had a couple random numbers in there for Scribd and other borrowed items. All right, and then genre. I was not super surprised by this time. I mean, I wasn't. General fiction was just under 30%. Historical fiction was just over 25%. Historical fiction, I was not surprised, was like my highest specific genre. The one that I was surprised about, though, was that my next highest was fantasy. I do not read fantasy very often, so that was really surprising to me. And then I had an even split with romance and sci-fi coming in next. And then, like I said, everything else was just kind of little things here and there. One of the things that I found interesting was my reason for reading. So I tracked whether I just read it just because I wanted to, if it was a review, if it was a read aloud with my kids, if I read it for a book club, or if it was for a buddy read. And I had about 60%, a little under 60% of my reading was I just did it for fun. And then a little under 20% was for review purposes, and then about a little over 15% was my buddy reads. And so I found that really interesting. And then we can look at these bar graphs and see that the number of books that I read that were per page count. So these are broken down like under 100 pages, 100 to 200, 200, 300, 300, 400, that sort of thing. And you'll see that the majority of the books that I read were between 300 and 400, with between 200 and 300 being the next one. But I mean, I will say that I was kind of surprised. I read 8 books that were between 500 and 600, and then 3 books that were over 600 pages. What? So that was kind of interesting to me as well. And then we can also see here my star ratings and how that kind of fell on the bar graphs. So you can see that most of my books were 4-star reads, and then 3-star reads, 5-star reads. I did have a decent number of 2-star reads, and then I never really rate anything 1-star. I think I need to reevaluate my rating system because I don't know, guys. I don't know. And then we can also see how I, like in a bar graph form, where I read the most as far as months go. And you can see here that my most successful reading month was March. Middle grade March. I read all middle grade and I read a ton of it. But then my next most successful was December. What? And with June being next. And so you can see kind of where my dips and inclines and declines were, things like that. I started out the year kind of slow. It jumped quite a bit in March, and then I kind of went right back down in April. But then I had a couple of really good reading months throughout the year. So that was kind of fun. And yeah, so that's really it as far as the charts and the stats and things like that go. I just had a lot of fun looking at the charts this year and seeing kind of the visualization of like the percentage of books that I read that are this and that. Not that I plan to change anything, I really don't. I'm perfectly fine with the way things are looking. But I just find it interesting. Do you find things like this interesting? I'd be curious to know. And then, yeah, like I said, I will link down below the spreadsheet that I used this past year, the one that I'm using this upcoming year. And yeah, I think that's what's gonna do it for today, guys. I just kind of wanted to share all this with you. I don't know if this is of any interest to you at all, but I find this kind of stuff really interesting, so I just wanted to share. So anyway, I'm gonna stop rambling. I hope that you enjoyed this. I hope that you stick around and subscribe, and until next time, see ya.